Dumu sent to administrative assistant Han Zhuo at Yangzhou. The blue mountains are dark, the water vast and wide. Autumn is finished down in the south, but the grass has not yet died. On the 24 bridges of Yangzhou, this moonlit night, where are you teaching some girl to play the flute? So we continue with Dumu's heptasyllabic quatrains. This is the fourth in the series. And as you can see from the title, this is a poem sent to a friend. From what I've checked, we don't know too much about this administrative assistant Han Zhuo. He appears in another poem by Du Fu, I believe. We know a little bit more about Yangzhou. Yangzhou has already appeared in references in poems in this series. Yangzhou was a very important entrepot, a hub of commerce during Tang Dynasty China. It was located, I think, in the confluence of the Grand Canal and the Yangtze, so it was an important middle point in the commerce that shipped lots of merchandise from the south into the north. It was a very prosperous city and a prized post for civil servants, a city of merchants, of riches, where everything could be bought and sold. And it had already been intensely liked by the last emperor of the Shui dynasty, Yangdi, who had temporarily moved his court to Yangzhou in the south. So it was a nice place, although it was a bit tainted with these associations of being a place of luxury, decadence, and pleasure, and not one of the traditional centers of Chinese capitals or of traditional culture. So this poem was probably written between 833 835, when Han Zhuo and Dumu were probably working over there in Yangzhou. This poem was probably written a little bit later after that, actually, when Dumu was transferred away, probably to a post that lacked much of the lustre that made Yangzhou so pleasant. So you could say that the topic of the poem is, well, of course, it's writing a poem to a friend, but it's basically nostalgia and reminiscence of those common pleasures that were enjoyed by Han Zhuo and Dumu in Yangzhou, and which are now only enjoyed by Han Zhuo alone. So there's this element of nostalgia and reminiscing in the poem. It's a very, very subdued. There isn't a very explicit depiction of the said pleasures, and the life and the splendors of Yangzhou are conveyed very indirectly in the second quatrain, in what affects the city, in the first quatrain, in what affects the natural scenery and the background. So as usual, let's take a look at the poem couplet by couplet. First couplet. The blue mountains are dark, the water vast and wide. Autumn is finished down in the south, but the grass has not yet died. So the first couplet, as we said, basically depicts the scenery, the natural scenery surrounding Yangzhou, and as usual, the first couplet also locates us in time of year and in physical location. Well, the title already told us that the poem was about Yangzhou. So we start with two elements of nature. There are mountains and there's the river. And they are described actually with a reduplicative adjective, like the original poem must be something like blue mountains, dark, dark, water, vast, vast, which is a technique that was used a lot in the Book of Odes, which had tetrasyllabic lines, and generally at least two of the characters were the same character repeated twice for emphasis and for intensification. So we're in this southern surrounding. We have blue mountains, dark, probably because they are pretty big and maybe in the shade, I don't know. The water expands because, this is the area of the big waterways of the south, like the Yangtze. And after these more stable natural phenomena, the natural phenomena that changes, like the seasons, autumn, and we're in autumn, it's late autumn. The autumn is finished down in the south, but the grass has not yet died. So autumn, remember, is the season with the melancholy tone for Chinese poems, and the poem is melancholy because when he is writing it, Du Mu is no longer with his friend. Autumn is finished here in the south, where probably Du Mu no longer is, or he's another part of the south. South is a very ambivalent category. For the ancient Chinese, south was really the area between the Huai and the Jiangsu rivers, the area of the old state of Chu. In the Tang Dynasty, there was another extreme south, which was the area of current-day Guangzhou, where Hong Kong and Canton are located. But here the south is referring to that middle area, as in traditional texts. So the grass has not yet died because it's not late in autumn, but also I imagine there's a symbolism associated with this. Perhaps that the reminiscences of our time together here, my memories of the pleasures I enjoyed with you in Yangzhou, are still on my mind. They haven't withered away either. Second couplet, and the second couplet moves us now squarely into the city and into those shared pleasures of Zhuo and Dumu. On the 24 bridges of Yangzhou, this moonlit night, where are you teaching some girl to play the flute? So as I said, the second couplet moves us into the city. The second couplet is also, it ends up with a question, whereas the first couplet was more stative or declarative. We do get an indication of time of day. We know we're in late autumn, but now we know that we're at night, which again, autumn is the season of melancholy and longing. Night under the moon is even more, the epitome of the wakefulness at night trope of Dumu, unable to sleep because he is remembering his friend, the shared time together, and probably the pleasures. So on the 24 bridges of Yangzhou this moonlit night. So Yangzhou, as we said, was a great city and located over the waters, a Venice of the East. So it had lots of bridges, and I'm not really acquainted with this, but I imagine those bridges might have been also scenarios for pleasure, for maybe doing parties on or next to them, contemplating the moonlight shining on the waves, perhaps with hired sing-song girls and musicians hosting parties in the probably mild autumn weather of central China. So rhetorically, Dumu is imagining or is asking his friend in which of those 24 bridges, and then 24 bridges also probably convey the size, the splendor, the wealth of Yangzhou, which could afford to have no less than 24 bridges crossing it, which is quite an impressive number. So on which of those bridges are you teaching some girl to play the flute? So this teaching a girl to play the flute is probably a very oblique, indirect reference to enjoying yourself in the company of sing-song girls, geisha-like, perhaps even ladies of ill repute. So it's probably a very oblique, very, very polite way of referencing the type of pleasures that Tang scholar officials enjoyed. They certainly reveled in the company of their peers and on reading and writing poetry and in the arts, but they also enjoyed the more frivolous pleasures of female companionship, drinking alcohol, listening to music, and enjoying beautiful women. So this teaching some girl to play a flute is probably quite euphemistic for just enjoying the company of some beautiful lady in the lovely nights of Yangzhou. So yeah, I think that's it. Not much more to say. I took a look at a version of the poem in the original Chinese, character by character. One of the things in the original is that in the second couplet there is a reference to a jade person. And I think it's probably ambiguous in the original. If that jade person, precious person, if that is a reference to assistant Han Zhuo teaching the girl to play, teaching sing-song girls or any beautiful girl to play the flute, or if it's a reference in the plural, the jade persons, to those women whose company he might be enjoying. Remember, classical Chinese includes no references for gender generally and no references for number, so it has a cultivated ambiguity. So overall, quite a small, little, charming poem about missed pleasures, not only of friendship, but of another nature as well.